theme of this campaign, we know the Constitution. I like the positive tone that is in the campaign. We know the Constitution. It doesn't say we want to know the Constitution or we aspire to know the Constitution, but it makes a very firm declaration, that we know the Constitution, and I think it's very important to frame issues in that manner, in a more positive spirit. And of course, the hashtag Constitution culture. Some of us who have been, talking about these things for a long time, we've always been, urging, fellow Zimbabweans, fellow citizens, to have a better appreciation of the importance of the Constitution, the importance of developing a culture where the Constitution is revered, where the Constitution is respected, is implemented, is applied, both in its letter, but even more importantly, in its spirit. A constitution can be a double-edged sword. It can be double-edged in that of an authoritarian regime. Many people who talk about the Constitution as a positive thing, perhaps only as a positive thing, forget that some of the worst dictators in history, people like Adolf Hitler, Stalin, people like Idi Amin, and so many other dictators, that have traversed this earth, they have all ruled with constitutions. They have all appealed to some law which they have held up and said, we are complying with the Constitution. And even Zimbabwe itself has also, gone through the same. We talk about, what has happened over the last 41 years in our country, but you can even go back to what happened during the colonial period. One of the first things that happened when Zimbabwe was colonized was to create a legal instrument that confirmed that this land was now in the control of a few people. So you talk about the Matabele land order in council, the Mashona land order in council. Then we start talking about the 1923 constitution and others and so forth. So when we talk about the Constitution, we have to be very careful that we want to frame it in a progressive way, because even dictators, even colonizers, imperialists, racists, homophobes, people who abuse, misogynists, they can also use constitutions as a way of legitimizing their control. So it's very important that people are fully aware of the advantages, the opportunities, but also of the hazards. And what we are seeing in Zimbabwe at the moment, unfortunately, after the high of 2013, when we came up with what we thought, as a collective, as Zimbabweans, a new constitution, we are now beginning to see a very retrogressive movement where that constitution is being eroded through amendments, amendments which are illegal. And in some cases, amendments do not only take place when they go through parliament. Sometimes amendments take place in practice when the president, when the cabinet, when ministers, go against the constitution, and there is nobody stopping them from continuing with those breaches. Let me give you an example, and it's an example that is so important because it's very topical, it's very current. Some of you may have come across a document which has been circulating this afternoon. where the cabinet of Zimbabwe says that it is recommending the appointment of certain judges, certain individuals to become judges of the High Court. I think some of you may remember that there were some judicial interviews which took place about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now, there is nothing in the constitution of Zimbabwe that gives power to cabinet to take any role, let alone to make recommendations to the president concerning the appointment of judges. The role of recommending is given by the constitution to the Judicial Services Commission. And it is only the Judicial Services Commission that has the authority to make recommendations to the president concerning the appointment of judges. That is what the constitution requires. That is what the constitution mandates. When you then add another layer, when you then create another avenue where another body, which is not mandated by the constitution to carry out that role, you are effectively amending the constitution through practice. And that in itself is unlawful. What are the hazards? What if, for example, the Judicial Services Commission had made certain recommendations, which then the cabinet, the men and women in cabinet, who are essentially politicians, decide that they do not want, and they probably have their own candidates, which they want? That in itself becomes a serious violation of the Constitution, which has an important impact on the governance culture in this country. And this is what worries some of us who are loyal to constitutionalism, the idea that people can suddenly just create rules. They can just create rules out of nowhere and decide that those arguments or those rules should apply in place of rules that are mandated by the Constitution. I could give you another example. The notorious Pollard, the political actors dialogue, or whatever it is called, that monstrosity is not provided for in the Constitution. Fine, the political system might decide to create an instrument or an arena in which people have their discussions. That's absolutely fine. President Mnangagwa can call his friends to Sherwood Farm or to his private home, and they can have their conversations and fund it that way. That's absolutely fine. But when you begin to use public funds in order to fund such an institution, then again you are violating the terms of the Constitution. You are undermining the institutions that already exist. We already have a parliament where people are voted into office in order to represent people. If there are any deliberations concerning the law need to be done, they are done in parliament. That is what our Constitution provides for. There is no provision for any other informal body, that is to be given that. But look at what has happened in Zimbabwe. President Mnangagwa decides that he's going to buy motor vehicles for these people whose only qualification to be in Poland is that, number one, they contested in the presidential election and that they lost in the presidential election, and third, that they submitted to the presidency of Mr. Mnangagwa. Those qualifications are what allow them or give them the opportunity to receive benefits. If Mr. Mnangagwa were taking it out of his pocket, that's absolutely fine. But when it comes from public funds, that in itself is a circumvention of established rules for the funding of political parties. We have a law in Zimbabwe called the funding of political parties. Our Constitution is very clear that there must be a law which provides for the funding of political parties. Does that law exist? Yes, of course it does. It's called the Political Parties Financing Act. That law says a political party must have at least 5% of the vote in an election in order to qualify for funding by the state, because these are public funds, these are taxpayer funds. Someone has to be accountable for them. They have to be used in an appropriate way. But in this case, we see people who got a handful of votes, who do not even have a single MP in parliament, getting benefits from the public purse, contrary to what the Political Parties Act says, contrary to what the Constitution says. Already you are creating parallel structures. The third instance of a parallel structure is another monstrosity that is located in the office of President Mnangagwa. It's called the Special Anti-Corruption Unit. You see, the Constitution, or the makers of the Constitution, Parliament, in its wisdom, decided that we have a problem of corruption in Zimbabwe. Let us create a body, a constitutional body, which will be independent, a constitutional body which will have sufficient arsenal in order to tackle the issue of corruption. And they called that the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. So it's there in the Constitution. But what does Mr. Mnangagwa do? He comes in, he creates an office in his own office, which he calls the Special Anti-Corruption Unit, which is supposed to do the very same job that the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission does. In any event, some of the worst corruption, as history shows, around the world, not just in Zimbabwe, often takes place in the center where power lies, in the place where you have the most power, because people who associate themselves with that center of power are the people who are more likely to use their office in a way that is inappropriate. And that is the office of the president. But what does Mr. Mnangagwa do? He creates an office, gatekeepers. You would think that they are gatekeepers against corruption, but you could imagine that they are gatekeepers for corruption. And it's problematic, whatever the case might be, to have a body that is nowhere in Zimbabwe's constitution, nowhere in Zimbabwe's laws, trying to exercise functions that are already provided for to bodies that are constitutional, such as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission and the National Prosecution Authority. A few weeks ago, we had this chap, what is his name again? Tafazwa Mguti. Tafazwa Mguti, I don't know what title he has under the structures of what Mr. Mnangagwa called provincial offices or provincial ministers, which, by the way, is another circumvention of the Constitution. You see, under our Constitution, we are supposed to have provincial councils. We are supposed to have a devolved administration. The idea of devolution was to ensure that people at the local level are able to govern themselves so that they are the ones who understand their concerns. They are the ones who understand their interests. They are the ones who know the challenges that they face. So devolution is meant to empower people at the local level in order to better govern themselves. But authoritarian regimes don't like devolution. They might create a facade, sort of a fraud where they say we are devolving power, but they want to keep power to themselves. And that's why you don't see reforms to the laws, the Urban Councils Act, the laws that govern local authorities. Under those laws, everything is still concentrated in the office of the Minister for Local Government. So all those local authorities, people say, oh, they are in the hands. I feel sorry for, pity for some of the opposition parties. I've said before, they have responsibility, but they don't have any power, which of course raises questions about, the whole purpose of participating in that charade, because they get into institutions where they will be blamed for the failings of those administrations, and yet they know that they do not have the power. There is no power at all. That power is in the hands of the minister. They serve essentially at the pleasure of the Minister for Local Government. That is one of the greatest tragedies of our political system, where you have got this appearance of opposition parties being in control of local authorities, when in fact, if you ask any of them, they will admit that they have no power. But anyway, Tafatka Mguti writes a letter to civil society organizations, and he says he wants them to come to a meeting, some kangaroo court that he is presiding over. It's the problem of little men. You allow them access to the wardrobe of kings, then they wear these robes, and suddenly, oversized robes, they start thinking that they are also kings, and this is what this chap did. He writes a letter and says that he wants the NGOs to come to him and to submit certain documents and so forth. And so some of us ask, very legitimately, I imagine, where are you getting this power from? Because if you ask any student of law, first year, even a student of public administration, they will tell you that the very basic thing that you need when you exercise power, you must have the lawful authority to do so. Now, this Muguti guy claims to be a provincial administrator or development officer, but obviously he's devoid of knowledge, of content concerning administration, and he writes this letter without any authority. Of course, the matter went to court. He was challenged by some non-governmental organizations, and they got an interdict. It was always going to come. My problem, though, is not so much people like Muguti who are overzealous in the roles that they've been assigned to. It is with organizations and individuals who submit to this unlawfulness. Because a few weeks later, we saw a letter which was identifying a number of organizations that apparently had responded to Muguti, suggesting that they had acquiesced to what was a patently unlawful request. But that is the problem. People are so happy in their state of oppression that even when they are told to do unlawful things by someone who does not have lawful authority, instead of challenging it like their colleagues do, they go on and submit and say, we raise our heads, we are going to do whatever you want us to do. It's problematic. There is no way that you can build a constitutional culture when you have people submitting to authority, to rules that are completely against the values, the rules, and the principles, of the Constitution. I'm aware that I've already spoken quite a lot, but it's unfortunate that you found me in a mode. It's like a diesel. Once we get going, we keep going. Let me just wind up by saying that I would like to commend people. Number one, for public awareness. Well done, We Lead. Well done, organizations. They are part of our group, the Constitutional Law Center, which we created in order to assist the efforts of those who are already doing fantastic work. I see that Kubatana is here. They do fantastic work trying to promote the Constitution. I see their T-shirts. They haven't sent me one. I hope I can get one in the post soon. I would like to wear it as well. People are doing fantastic work. You've got organizations like the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. They have been doing fantastic work, Zim Rights, trying to promote education, to educate people. And one of the ways in which this is done is by challenging violations. So we saw my brother Musa Kika, Dr. Kika, a very courageous action a few months ago. People were saying, what's the point? You are going to lose this case anyway. You know what? In litigation of this nature, it is not that you are going to win that particular litigation. We know how the judiciary is. That case was challenging the status of the judiciary. We knew that the judges have an interest in the matter. The point was about challenging it and saying, no, you can go ahead and do it, but this is wrong. A point was made. The result was never in doubt because you are dealing with a case the analogy that I often give is it's like hyenas are devouring goats in the village, and then the goats decide to go to hyenas to say, can you judge our case against fellow hyenas? I think that it becomes very difficult to expect anything positive there. But the most important thing is, of course, to have this culture of challenging illegality. It has to be done. The point that I've already made about the cabinet recommending the appointment of judges, that is patently unlawful. And I would hope that there will be action challenging that and saying that this is unlawful. Of course, the judges might not have the courage to tell President Mnangagwa and his cabinet that they are wrong, but it must be put on the record that they are wrong. People must go and challenge that in the court of law. You know that they might say, well, we don't agree with you, but people must make a statement that this is a violation of the Constitution. I think that there should be more creativity. I always say, catch them young. You must go to the primary schools, speak to the young people. It must be in the curriculum. Now, I say this with the greatest of respect. I have nothing against religion. I like the fact that we have certain standards that help us to guide us as a people. But it always fascinates me that our people are able to quote the religious texts that guide our lives, the Bible, the Quran. You can wake them up at 3 a.m. and they'll quote a verse. They might be even drunk, but they will remember a verse. Whatever the occasion, they will remember a chapter, they will remember something. But ask them about the Constitution, ask them about the book, the text that guides their life in terms of their relationship with their governors. You draw a blank. There will be no, people say we don't know anything, and so how then are we able to hold leaders to account? How then are we able to enforce this social contract that people have with the government if we have no knowledge of what that is? I would be so happy. I do dream of this day when people can ordinary people can quote the verse and chapter of the Constitution in the same way that they can quote the verse and chapter of the Bible or the Quran. Thank you so much. Now,
Yes.
I'm not sure if
No.
anyone
No.
was if I was talking to anyone there now, because everyone is
Yeah.
quiet.
No. You were talking to me. I was connecting. I was hearing you. Thank you so much, Doc. No, you spoke very well. Uh, we as the people, not only as the young people, we need to come to a point where we can actually defend the Constitution. But the challenge now is that people are not even aware of the Constitution. They don't know what is in the Constitution. So, as they say, you cannot be an advocate of something that you don't know. So we really have a challenge. So the first step, of course, is to let people know about the Constitution, and then we move on to defending the Constitution. But we need to do that as soon as possible, because we have a serious challenge, because the government is doing what it's doing. And by the time we realize it, or by the time we start defending the Constitution, it may possibly be too late. So I will take a few questions before Wongai can come in. If there's anyone who wants to ask Talk a few questions, you can request and I will let you speak. Hello, Dan, you can speak. Hello, Danny, can you hear me? You can speak.
and the People's Advocate. Thanks for the platform. What I just want to say or ask or contribute, depending on how you how you take what I'm going to say, is that I mean the Constitution. It's fair and fine that we must read it and know it, but then if we look at the nature of a constitution, what is a constitution? It's far beyond the piece of paper that's on the that's in a little book, right? Or that's in a little piece of um, a little piece of paper with rules and what. We all know that it's far beyond that. Is it not a better way? Is it not better to teach people about the Constitution by infusing that with teaching them leadership? Because yes, we know when ZANU-PF, or rather when the government, rather, let me be a little bit more politically correct here. When the government does whatever it does, people know it's illegal. I mean, they've never read though, and then they can quickly flip a page and whatever, and they know it's illegal, but then there's just no one or not enough people doing anything about it. So I really think that the issue is not necessarily people don't know about or don't know what's in the Constitution. What is lacking is leadership. Leadership, not to say I want CEOs and presidents and lawyers, but leadership of common citizens to gather and say, look, our constitution is under attack. Our an aspect of the constitution has been completely been trumped up. What do we do? How do we address that? Because if we, I can promise you, this is a problem in many countries, even in the Western world. You hardly find anyone who knows what's in the Constitution, except maybe a few parts of the Bill of Rights. Yeah, I got my right of expression. Oh, you hardly find that. But then what you will find in, especially in first world constitutional democracies, you will find people that are actually leaders, right? They know that, okay, even if the Constitution says that this sounds wrong, and I'm going to gather all my like-minded people and then take it up and then resolve it, or however way we can, constitutionally or by exercising our rights of expression and protest and whatever. So I think that as you launch your constitutional campaign, I think I see there's We Lead here. I'm pretty sure they focus on that, but there should be a greater emphasis on teaching and training people leadership, teaching and training people to stand up, teaching people to understand what is happening in their country, what is happening in their politics, what is happening in their economics, and so forth. That's my contribution for now.
Okay, thank you so much, Danny. I'll allow Monashe to speak, and if there are any questions to answer, maybe Namatai, Memor, or Talk can answer, and then Wongai will come in afterwards. Thank you. Over to you, Monashe. Monashe, are you there? O'Brien, can you hear me? Yeah, it seems that Monashe is having some challenges. Talk or Memor, do you have anything you want to add before I hand over to Wongai?
Well, I think that Danny raised some important issues, but there are issues of implementation. I think that there is a common agreement that we have a problem, and he is quite right that this is not a problem that is confined to developing countries. I think that even in first world countries, not everybody knows what is in their constitutions. I mean, I live in a country where the constitution is even unwritten. But that's why people are talking about the constitution culture. You may not know the exact terms of what the rules say, but over generations, people absorb and understand that certain things are right, that certain things are wrong, and they might want to go to a lawyer to get a specific explanation, but you must just know, you must just grow up knowing what is expected of you, your duties as a citizen, for example, that you must pay taxes, that you must obey the law, your rights as a citizen. These are things that are now taken very much for granted in these first world countries, because there is that constitutional culture which has been developed over generations. Now, I know that some people may latch onto this and say, "But Alex, our country is very young compared to the countries that you are referring to, and therefore we must also wait 200 years or 300 years before we have the same culture." But we don't have that luxury. We need to work on it more, and that's why people are talking about creative ways of promoting public awareness, people knowing what is expected of them. uh, Sometimes, and I want to challenge people here, sometimes we sometimes we focus so much on the government, we focus so much on opposition parties, we focus so much on institutions. What we don't do with as much vigor, I think, is an introspection of our own personal conduct as people. And when I say this, I'm talking about our duties as individuals in communities, as well as our rights as individuals in communities. I mean, how many times do we see videos of either men or women being subjected to torture? And, people laugh about it and people even justify it. But in doing so, we don't realize that we are promoting a culture of violence, a culture, that says physical force is the solution to a problem. How then do we not see that there is a problem when this is replicated at the very highest levels of our government? We see conduct, among ourselves, where we cheat each other, where we do things, that perhaps we would raise serious questions if they were being done by government officials. But we think it's cleverness to be able to do that. We think it's a smartness to be able to do that. And we even revere people who do that. That kind of culture is something that is not tackled always at the top level. It is tackled at the community level. I like the work that is being done by organizations like Zim Rights. They've got community champions. They've got clubs, constitution clubs at certain high schools. We would like to see that, expanding more. I also think that civil society could do better by working together, by collaborating and creating networks where they can, because you can't cover the whole of Zimbabwe. You can't cover all the issues, but people can work together. Unfortunately, civil society, just like business and politics, is also plagued by petty conflicts, petty jealousies, which result in divided efforts, which result in conflicts, which are unnecessary. And I think that more could be achieved if people put their heads together and found common ground in the way that they tackle this very important societal problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. I will now hand over to Ongai, and then I'll take more questions before Namatai will come and give the vote of thanks. Over to you, Ongai. Ongai, and then I'll take more questions before Namatai.
I think maybe Wongai's microphone, there's something wrong with it because she is speaking, but we can't hear her. So maybe if you could fix the microphone, Wongai.
Yes, Ongai, can you hear me? You can send me a message directly if you can hear me. Ngoni, if you want to speak, you can speak while Wangai is sorting your challenges with the microphone. Ngoni, can you hear me? Hello, Ngoni. Yeah, it looks like both of them are having challenges. I'm not sure if there's anyone who has a question or wants to add something. If Wangai and Kon keep having these challenges, I think we have to. Hello. Wangai, you have a platform, you can speak. Wangai.
Mr. Host.
Yes, Doc.
Yeah, I think that we are having challenges with our colleagues. Can I entertain your guests with a very short story on dual citizenship? The reason I say so is because there are people who are asking about dual citizenship earlier today, but I thought someone was going to ask a question. Just very quickly.
Okay, no, it's okay. You can speak, and then Glenn Loa, you will speak afterwards. Yeah.
That's okay.
Doc.
Okay.
Yes.
I see. I was just going to be what we used to be called musical interlude, but this was going to be a dual citizenship interlude. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is that a lot of Zimbabweans, it seems to me, are still very confused and unaware that the constitution allows for dual citizenship, for citizens. In other words, you can be a citizen of Zimbabwe, but if you have gained citizenship of the US or the United Kingdom or Australia, you are also entitled to that citizenship. I think that we had a lot of problems during the time of Mr. Mudede, Tobaiwa Mudede, when he was the Registrar General. He ruled that empire with an iron fist. He made it very difficult. People like Mutuma Mawere had to go to court. I remember in 2013, he was represented by my friend Fadzai, and he won that case. It was the first case to confirm the legality of dual citizenship in Zimbabwe. But it seems to me that even with the elaborate provisions which allow it and the judicial confirmations of it, people are either still unaware or they're still facing some difficulties. I would be delighted to know what difficulties people are facing, because it's part of how you promote the Constitution if people understand the benefits that it has for them and how they can make use of it. It wasn't easy to get the dual citizenship clause because some political parties were totally against dual citizenship. They had been against it for many years. I remember that when we were advocating for dual citizenship, people like myself were being accused of promoting self-interest. What they did not know, which they got to know then, was that I, despite being eligible for dual citizenships elsewhere, still am a mono citizen. I've kept my citizenship of Zimbabwe because I'm happy with it. And for these people, they thought, oh, he's acting out of self-interest, but it wasn't. In any event, we were able to achieve this, I think, important milestone in the Constitution. And I think many people should take advantage of it. If you are a citizen of another country, by all means, make sure that you get your citizenship of Zimbabwe. It's good for your own children as they grow up. Who knows? Things are not going to be the way they are. You have them with one foot at home and with another in the diaspora where they may be. But I would be delighted to know if people have any challenges that they are facing and what those challenges might be so that they can be challenged. Thank you. I will hand over to Glenn.
Okay, thank you, Doc. Glenn, you can come in.
Thank you very much for the host of this show. I think it's a very important space to hold, and thank you so much, Dr. Alex Wamakaisa, for the conversations. I guess what I have is probably a follow-up and a comment as well, because this is a topic that I'm very keenly interested in. And why I say it's a follow-up, because I think Danny B brought up a very important dynamic here to say that he phrased it as saying we need the citizenry, the ordinary citizenry, to have leadership in the defense and protection of the Constitution, as they should rightly be. I mean, as the custodians of the Constitution. But I wanna retrace back to the time where you, Dr. Wamakaisa, was involved in the framing of the Constitution that we have now. It was widely touted as a people-driven constitution. A lot of money, I think about 50 million, was used from the UNDP alone, was used to do community outreach meetings, to get to hear what the people of Zimbabwe wanted in their constitution. And this was supposed to be in direct contrast to what we had from the Lancaster House Agreement, which gave us a negotiated constitution, where there was very minimum citizen participation, actually zero citizen participation, and there wasn't participative democracy in that. So we made this veiled attempt at saying, let's incorporate the views and the aspirations of the people of Zimbabwe in framing this constitution. But lo and behold, political elites colluded. The opposition and the ruling party colluded and had negotiations that threw out what the people of Zimbabwe wanted. And I know that it may be easy for me to say as a spectator and a person who was not, involved in the process, because some parties may be threatened that they would walk away from the whole thing, and then other parties felt, let's salvage what is there. But we know that what happened towards the end was we had a negotiated constitution after so much facade and pretense about saying, let's hear from the people of Zimbabwe. So what I want to ask is saying, if we want to say, let's incorporate and inculcate a culture of having Zimbabweans interested in constitutionalism, how do we then promise them that what happened before will not happen again? And that onus does not rest on one person, but it's a very important question for us to start to think about before we speak about the culture, because the culture of the people of Zimbabwe is that over 2 million people attended the outreach meetings, but some of their views were thrown out for political expediency. So how do we mitigate that now going forward to say, how do we handle the political elites, both the bureaucrats and the politicians?
Oh, thank you so much. Do you want me to go ahead, my brother?
Yes, you can go ahead, Doc.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Glenn. In some ways, your very thoughtful question preempts a discussion that we are hoping to have at some point together with my brother Musa Kika under the banner of the Constitutional Law Center another time. I think I've spoken for too much this week, so it may not be this week, but we'll see. But one of the things that I've pledged to do, through the CLC, is to talk to and with the Zimbabweans about the constitution making process. What went on? What were my observations as a participant in that process, about how certain things were achieved and other things were lost. I say so because I think we have done a disfavor to the people of Zimbabwe in that we have not publicly documented a lot of these things. And what it has done is that I think it has opened up a very huge gap to conjecture. It has opened up a huge gap to speculation. And sometimes, people make very big and throwaway comments, which appear like fact and which are not always backed by evidence. That is largely our fault, in that we have not presented this information, which people need to use. I must confess, I have a manuscript that I have sat on for a while, but it will come. It will explain, for example, how we ended up with clauses concerning issues like corporal punishment and so forth, and other areas which have been left out in the Constitution. But let me say this, Glenn. The term people-driven constitution is a political, to my mind, both wearing my academic hat, but also as a practitioner. I find it to be a slogan, a rhetoric which often is not matched by reality. And the reason why I say so, I will explain. Almost all constitutions are or have been elite-driven. If not elite-driven, certainly they have been elite-steered. Because at the end of the day, whatever you get from, imagine you have 50 million people and they offer their views on a particular issue. They are never going to be uniform views. So number one, there is almost always conflict in the views of the people. So the notion of people-driven, it makes this very huge assumption that there's some uniformity in what the people are saying. The reality is that it's never like that. And for me, I came after the outreach process had been completed. And one of my jobs was to go through this data and try to make sense of it. And I can tell you, my brother Glenn, that it was one of the most difficult exercises that I've had to do. Not only sometimes was the information unclear, sometimes there were huge conflicts in the information that you then had to say, so which view do we take on this? So when people say views of the people were thrown out, I sometimes just say, have a right smile and say, which ones were thrown out and which ones were accepted? Because there were different views on these issues. And I would like I say, to have a session where we talk about all these different aspects. So, for example, should we have a president or should we have a prime minister? Should we have a ceremonial president? There were so many views, so many thoughts put forward. The job then is to distill, all this information and try to come up with something that makes sense. Another reason, my brother Glenn, is that there would be some gaps in the information. So you might have very great views that have been provided, but there will be something missing in there, and that gap needs to be filled. So there was an exercise, for example, which was called the gap filling exercise, where you then had to say that this is what has been said, this is what we have. But it's like working with a jigsaw puzzle. There's always that piece which is missing. You have to create it and try and put it in place so that the picture is complete. I've already talked about the vagueness of information. Sometimes when information is vague, you have to make sense of it. You have to interpret it so that you are able to present it in a fashion that is conducive for a constitution. The final one, Glenn, and I think for me the most important, is our obligations under international law and human rights. Now, I'll tell you something which was quite shocking to me. There were some people who actually thought that it's okay to have torture. Who thought that it was okay to have coercive methods of getting evidence from criminals, from people. Now you have this information, Glenn, and you say, let us assume that it is the majority view. As a lawyer who is participating in the constitution making process, I know that there is a convention against torture, which is obligatory. We have signed up to these things. I know that there is the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. I know that there is the United Nations Charter of Human Rights. I know that there are so many instruments, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, all these international instruments specifically and totally prohibit torture. They don't even allow it at all. There are so many judgments which say that. Now, how do I sit there and say, this is what the people say? They say they want torture. so we are going to put it in the constitution. You know, it's it's very difficult. Now, some might say, well, Magaisa, it's not right to refuse what the people say, but it's a challenge which I think professionals face in their different fields. It's almost a moral question. You know, what do you do with that? But I'm not embarrassed to say that I could never have taken torture and supported its inclusion in the constitution. I could never have allowed the use of coercive methods to get information out of people and have it in the constitution. If people say, Bagaisa, you disregarded the people, then I'm happy to plead guilty to that particular one. So I'm just giving you examples. There are other examples. Yesterday, I was on a space where I talked about, you know, guardianship. There was nothing in the data that we got from the people which said that women should be given guardianship rights as men. But we had information which said there should be equality between men and women. So I would then come in, for example, just to give my side of the story and say, you know, our law says that guardianship goes to the man, to the father, you know, custody to the mother, but guardianship, you know, the law was so, you know, uneven in that regard, you know, very gender insensitive. And so I say, well, I think that we need to give guardianship rights to women in the constitution. And some colleagues said, but Magresa, where are you getting that from? Because we don't have it on the data from the people. And then I would say, oh, but we have data which says there must be equality between men and women. And I think that the law on guardianship promotes inequality between men and women. Why don't we create equality by conferring guardianship rights on women as well as they are for men? And now I will tell you, regardless of party affiliation, when it comes to matters like that, you know, people group according to their interests. So there would be a gender, there would be a gender. You know, men would say, but guys, I have to my rights. My rights are, you know. It was so difficult, I mean, to get that particular right of guardianship into the constitution for women. The one reason why it was then allowed was the men said, okay, we must also have equal rights to custody, you know, and then that was the compromise that was reached, that they should be equal. Men and women are equal in getting guardianship, but the idea was to ensure that women got guardianship. So I was happy with that. But I'm just trying to explain to you some of the dynamics that went in there in terms of coming up with this constitution. The result, of course, is that there are some provisions which are watered down. There are some provisions which are not to my own liking, but there were many trade-offs that had to be done. I agree with you. The negotiation aspect was problematic, but I can't imagine how else it could have been done. My own view is that I've never seen, and I may be wrong in this, but I've never seen a situation where, unless there is a total overthrow of the establishment, there is a constitution that is done without the people who are in the corridors of power. You know, because the constitution is about arrangements of power, and they're not going to sit back out there and wait while some people are creating a law. After all, at the end of the day, you need those people in the corridors of power to carry that law into the into parliament and to get it. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to say, oh, but why didn't this happen? And Glenn, you are very right to raise these issues, because I'm sure many people raise them as well. And but it's also good to get an opportunity to be able to have these conversations with people who were there, who can then maybe give a perspective on these issues. It doesn't mean that we are defending it or we are saying it's right, but I think that it's important just to provide that information so that people can then argue from an informed position. There are so many more fascinating stories that we can talk about, you know, another time. Like I said, we are going to arrange a session where we'll talk about some of these things, and I'll also tell you, for example, how clansmanship was also very important beyond political party affiliation or even gender affiliation. Clansmanship, all those things played some very important parts in solving some very difficult moments. There were moments when some people in ZANU-PF were very unhappy with me, but I would get my Mzukuru, coming up because his mother is a Masisi, he would come to my aid and say, no, you cannot do that to Zeguru, and it would diffuse problems. But, these are some of the stories of things that happen behind the scenes, beyond what we see in the public galleries. But I always think they are fascinating stories for people to understand how sometimes conflict is created and sometimes how conflict is resolved beyond the public domain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. Wongai, are you ready? If you're ready, just speak. If it doesn't work this time around, I think I'll try to take a few more questions. If there's no one who's asking, Namata will then give us a vote of thanks and we'll conclude. So, Wongai, can you speak? I'll let you know if you can hear you. Wongai. I think the problem is persisting. If there's anyone who has something to add, who wants to ask anything else, you can request to speak and I'll approve you. I don't think there's anyone. So Namatai, we can come in and conclude.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, that's absolutely fine. And thank you so much, Prince, for the splendid hosting. Thanks very much to our speakers, and very unfortunate for those who were not able to speak. I think maybe what would have been nice if it was if Memory would have responded as well to some of the questions if she was still in the room. But nonetheless, I'm very, very grateful that
sorry, Namatai, I think Wongai is speaking now. If you can, I was hearing you. Yes, you can speak briefly. Wongai.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello. Okay, that's fine. I thought my network had dropped.
Okay, fine. Namata, you can. I think network is a real challenge. Namata is also dropped in, and I can't quite hear you. So I guess I'll have to conclude that. Thank you so much, everyone who have tuned in. Thank you so much, Dr. Magaisa, for explaining so much about the Constitution, from the history, for also about knowing the Constitution and about defending the Constitution. Thank you also to Memory. You spoke very well about the role of the students and where does the Constitution comes in to the students. It's very unfortunate that two of our speakers, Wongai and Makumbare, were not able to speak due to network challenges. But also thank you to Namatai for this wonderful program. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope to hold a similar thing again soon. That's it for tonight. Good night, everyone.